If you've ever been tempted to exaggerate your grades or anything else on your CV or your job application, you may also be wondering whether that's okay, or what happens if you get found out. So if that's the case, you'd better watch the rest of this video right the way till the end, because you might be in for a shock. But first of all, welcome back, and if you're new to me, I'm a barrister who helps you understand law, so I'd really appreciate it if you bop that like button at any point that you think is relevant in this video, and subscribe if you haven't already. So as I know many people are impatient and want the answers straight away, there is always a short version and a long version. The short version is, it's illegal to lie on your CV or your job application. The long version is a bit more complicated. So let's go back to basics. When you're drafting your CV and perhaps your job application, whether that's filling it in online or drafting a covering letter, either way, you put these together and you give them to a prospective employer, and they are then to make a decision whether to employ you based on the information that you've given to them. Here's the important bit. You are making a representation to the prospective employer. You are representing yourself. You are representing your grades, your history, your experience, even potentially down to what you were paid at your previous job. Because if you say you were paid £100,000 when in fact you weren't, then that's not quite true. Now, your new employer may think that if your previous employer found reason to pay you £100,000, then perhaps they ought to be doing so as well, somewhat relying on some company they've never heard of. Or worse still, if you say that you earned £100,000 from a big, well-known, reputable company when perhaps you didn't. Either you didn't earn £100,000 or you didn't work for them at all. Either way, that is a false representation. And this is what's likely to get you into trouble. You see, the Fraud Act of 2006 provides that if you make a representation to somebody else, which is dishonestly false, in order to make a gain for yourself or for somebody else, this is a fraudulent misrepresentation. It is a statement of fact which is false, made dishonestly with the intent to make a gain. What's worse is you are very unlikely at a later stage to be able to say, that was an accident, I put 2-1 instead of 2-2. That's unlikely to assist you because you've still made this representation, and so it's important to get the details right. So let's look at what is likely to happen if you lie or make a false representation on your CV or your job interview or your covering letter. Well, this is broken into a couple of different categories, so we'll take them one at a time. Firstly, what could happen with your prospective employer? Secondly, what might happen with your current employer? And thirdly, could this get you into even more trouble than just not getting the job that you've applied for? Well, first of all, in virtually every job application, there are going to be terms and conditions, and if not express, most likely implied, that they are going to check your CV and any application for its accuracy. In part, they might contact your previous schools and colleges and universities to get confirmation of what those grades were. In almost every job application process, there will be a term that says you are providing consent for them to check the accuracy of the information given. Even if you're applying through some website and you've uploaded your information to that website, there will be terms and conditions on that website to say that they might pass information across to the prospective employer and that they might have legitimate cause to check its accuracy. Moreover, let's say no checks are done by the point you actually land the job on the basis of your porky pies within your CV. There's almost certainly going to be a term in the contract of employment to say that any information you've provided us, we are going to check for its accuracy, meaning again they can go back to your schools, colleges, universities and anywhere else that you say you got these qualifications from. Upon contact with said organization is likely to retain that information because it's got a legitimate reason for doing so, i.e. keeping an accurate record of who's qualified for what at their institution, including your current employer. If you landed the job on the back of your creative writing skills in your CV, they will have a legitimate cause to go after that data, and the institution will have a legitimate cause to provide it. More embarrassing on the face of it, however, is if during the interview you are asked a question about something that you profess to be highly skilled at, another language, for example, only to be greeted by an interviewer who happens to be fluent in that language and you can't hold a conversation. A number of things might happen as a result of this, not least of which you might be excluded from the application process from said prospective employer, but you might also be reported to any job website that you've provided false information through, and they might blacklist you from using the site thereafter. Worse still, however, might be ironically if you get away with this lie in the first instance and it's discovered much later. later. Let's take an example. Let's say you are hired for a very difficult position and paid quite a handsome salary for it. If many years down the line, by this point you've been paid hundreds of thousands of pounds, but it then comes to light that you lied on your CV in the first place and didn't have the requisite qualifications that you said you did in the first place, because this would be held to be a fraudulent misrepresentation, there's going to be very little limit on the amount of damages the company can reclaim from you. One thing worth bearing in mind is that the statute of limitations will only begin to run to reclaim from you the damages from the moment the fraud was discovered, or that it could have been discovered with reasonable diligence. In other words, you might have been working there for 10 or 15 years or more without them discovering the truth. But upon discovering the truth, they could potentially claim back every penny they've ever paid you, along with other damages along the way. And one little snippet for the keyboard warriors that are likely to say there's no way you can prove this was dishonest if it was a simple mistake. Actually, the employer doesn't necessarily have to prove that it was dishonest, just that you were reckless as to the truth of what you provided in your application. That's enough for it to be dishonest to support a claim for false misrepresentation. So employers aside, what else might happen if you're caught lying on your CV? Well, to put it bluntly, you could be prosecuted for fraud, because fraud by false representation is a criminal offence. In fact, it attracts a 10-year prison sentence with a fine. So fraud by false representation is a very serious issue, and based on the level of gain you've received by making this fraudulent representation, you may well be reported to the police, you may well be prosecuted, and you may well be sent to prison. So that little bit of creativity that you thought about putting onto your CV or your job application, think again, because it can be far more serious than just losing the job. So if that was at all helpful to you, please like the video and subscribe, and also check out my Black Belt Secrets channel linked in the description below, because I love to share more of my own personal thoughts on there which don't belong on this channel. In the meantime, thank you for watching.